Even though economic transformation has been a priority for the country since the general elections of 1994, it was nearly 10 years later, only in 2003, that the first strategy of broad-based black economic empowerment was gazetted as the government's chosen vehicle for addressing the socio-economic injustices of the apartheid era. When the concept of BEE was introduced to the South African business community, it was met with resistance by those already established and who were no doubt fearful that years of earnest endeavor would be squandered. But there is no doubt that a decisive strategy was needed to get South Africa on track to compete amongst international economies, with all citizens having an opportunity to participate and earn a better and more prosperous future. That is, after all, the intention of BEE, to uplift the black people of South Africa in the context of a culture of fairness and equal opportunity for every person, irrespective of race, culture, age, or gender. We now find ourselves 18 years later with an economy traumatized by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has only highlighted the inequalities that still remain in South Africa. The poor are still poor and the rich are getting richer. But of most concern is our dwindling middle class. There have been those who have adopted the principles of BEE wholeheartedly for a better good, and those who have manipulated the system for their own benefit, happy to be used as tokens. It really is time to remind ourselves that BEE is not intended for the enrichment of a limited number of black people, but that it is there to give everyone the chance to get an education, embark on a career, and accumulate wealth. It is therefore high time that a measurement like the Sanlam gauge enters the conversation. It's the first time that a consolidated measure of the BEE scorecard performance of industry sectors has been measured. It will provide a clearer idea of which industries are fulfilling requirements best and the lessons that others can learn in reaching theirs.
What Intellidex has done then is to go through over 3,000 scorecards to be able to determine where they stand as an industry, as a sector, as well as overall as a country. We had looked at all of the companies where they were put into their sector codes, and we were then able to determine what their total target, in other words, the scorecard performance would be, or should be in particular. So, for example, you will note that a lot of the sectors have different total scorecard targets, with the generic being at 111, and agri being at 119, and some of the others being at 124. So you will see here that we've got the percentages that have been achieved by the different sectors. And these percentages, as I explained earlier on, would have been based on how far the particular industries or the sectors were from getting their full scorecard results. Now, you will note that they would be based on different target scores, which is obviously the number of points that are available. And the target scores that we have there, they do not include the bonus. So you would see here in the first column where we look at the recognition levels, quite a lot of the sectors were able to attain a level 1 based on their scoring. That would have been their average as an industry, which is quite interesting. So it is very encouraging to see that quite a lot of them have been able to attain this. However, then we go into the details and we look at construction, not so great at level 2. However, if you consider that a lot of companies are aiming to trade with level 1 and level 2 companies, perhaps construction would fare quite well. But we also know that construction is a particularly competitive industry, and therefore when you see them averaging a level 1, then you should know that they must have worked very hard. There aren't as many agri companies that are out there, so for them it would therefore be easier than to attain a level 1 and maintain it as well. Financial services was also in level 1 region, and what we find is that in those sectors where it is highly regulated or where there's a lot of licensing that is required, accreditations and things like that, we find that those particular sectors are likely to pay more attention to BEE and are likely to want to ensure that they are at the very top, because then it allows them to be able to continue trading. It's like a license to trade. Then we have the integrated transport. Now, this one is a little bit of a problem, not the industry themselves, but the sector code in this particular case is not based on the 2013 codes that we are assessing for everybody else. All the other sectors that I'm mentioning here, they have been aligned to the BEE codes that came out in 2013. The integrated transport and all the subsector codes are still aligned to the 2007 codes. And as you know, quite a lot has changed between the generic 2007 and 2013. So therefore, these companies that you're looking at, they would have been assessed on 7 elements as opposed to 5. They would have had to, they don't have any discounting. With generic and everybody else, there's discounting from ownership as well as from skills development and ESD. So these companies under the integrated transport, they do not have that type of discounting, which means that their score we can place reliance on if they're comparing themselves against themselves. However, it's not fully aligned to everybody else, so it's not a great comparison. But it is out of 100, and they are making quite a huge impact to the scorecard of the whole country, so therefore they have been included in this particular assessment. So they averaged level 2 with the old transport scorecards. It would be interesting to see, once they have been aligned, what their average score would have been. The expectation is that it shouldn't be that bad because, I mean, the codes have been out since 2013, and a lot of companies have had lots of time to go through it and understand exactly how they work, and therefore the expectation is, even though they're still using the old, they probably have processes in place already, so that should there be a change to the new scorecard, they will not be surprised with the extra requirements and the higher targets around procurement and things like that. So this gives us an indication from a granular point of view to say, for the different elements of the particular scorecard, how are we doing as an industry compared to other industries? And I think for me, this is the one slide that transformation managers probably want to take home and familiarize themselves with, because this is where it shows you what the average scores are for your industry and where you are as a transformation manager in terms of your benchmarking yourselves against the industry and against your previous scorecard, of course. So, for example, if you look at black ownership targets, most of the companies or in the different sectors are around about the same, except for defense, which is quite low. Therefore, you as a company in the marketing and advertising industry, you know that on average, we're sitting at 20 points out of 25. You as a company, are you on 15 or are you already at 25? That tells you that you still have a way to go to at least be on par. Now, this is then the result for all companies. In other words, this is how South Africa is doing from a BEE point of view, from a scorecard point of view. The average is sitting at 84.34. That is basically our recognition level. We are 84% towards the target in terms of the recognition level, which, if you were to look at the recognition levels on the scorecard, that is basically a level 4. Then we look at the black ownership aggregated through all the sectors. With this one, we're looking at 85%. That's where we are from the scorecard. Then there's management control, sitting at a lovely 57%, which was a bit of a shock. If you consider that South Africa has had an Employment Equity Act since the 90s, and then we've got BEE coming out in 2003, and there has been quite a lot of focus on employment equity ever since then, and it has become quite a normal way of doing business in South Africa. So it was quite interesting to note that as a country, we're sitting at quite a low percentage. This is definitely something that would need to be discussed, and we would need to dig deeper into it to figure out what is it about employment equity and management and control that it is not translating into higher scores over time. Then we've got skills development sitting at 70
76%. Skills development is quite interesting because there has been some changes around that came through in 2019 in terms of the targets for skills development, moving away from the full 6% to splitting it with bursaries for either your internal or external people. And also there's the bonus points under skills development that I know a lot of companies actually budget around. So the expectation would have been that it would be slightly better considering the amount of effort that would have come in. Skills development is a priority element. Therefore, if you don't reach the targets for this one, you get discounted.